Part 2 of turning my Toyota Prius into my home. Hi, I'm Holly, and this is my dog Emma Bear. In 2023, we took an 8-week, almost 10,000-mile road trip around the country. I folded down the seats and made it work, but honestly, it was pretty crowded. Every morning and every evening, I needed to rearrange the entire car. This is the second video in my Prius build series, and how we took my car from this to this over the course of 8 weekends in the spring of 2024. Originally, I was thinking I wanted to turn the front passenger seat into a little desk workspace somehow, but once I got my 61-key MIDI keyboard, I was just like, this isn't going to work. This doesn't fit. On the first road trip, I was traveling with a 37-key MIDI keyboard and would store it in the storage area above the spare tire. I figured that was probably also a good spot for the 61-key keyboard, but because the tray wasn't big enough, I knew it was going to have to be some sort of custom-built situation. So I started thinking that maybe there was some way to put a desk behind the driver's seat. You've already seen him, but let me introduce Rocco. This is his workshop, these are his tools, and he was the engineering brain who took my verbalized ideas and turned them into something very cool. The first day, we were just kind of looking at the car and starting to make plans and trying to figure out when to take out the seats and how to get started. And finally, I was like, let's just take the frickin' seats out and then we'll be able to figure out the next step. I didn't actually think that we were going to start taking apart the car at this time, so I didn't have a tripod with me. A really great thing to do when you're doing a complicated project like this is to have bags and a Sharpie so that you can put your parts in and label so that you can find them later when you need them. So we got to unplugging plugs, unbolting bolts, unscrewing screws. We watched a little bit of other people's YouTube videos just to make sure we weren't breaking anything, but everything was pretty straightforward. He had worked at an upholstery shop at some point, and he was much more confident than me when it came to just ripping things apart. Hiding underneath my seats were a few lost treasures and a ton of leaves and dirt. Delicious. So next we needed to remove the seatbelt buckles, which requires unbolting those parts. There's also a black metal triangle bracket that's part of this. It's kind of hard to see from this angle. I am a vacuumy kind of person, so I definitely wanted to vacuum and get all the dirt and leaves out that I could before we started making even more of a mess. For this part of the disassembly and eventually reassembly, what I needed were 3 different socket sizes, 10 millimeters, 14 millimeters, and 17 millimeters. I'm going to leave this part in here so that if you are having trouble or you just want to reference somebody else's work, you can just come back to this video. Once the seats and the seatbelt buckles were fully removed, it was time to start thinking about the bench that was going to go here. I am 5 feet 9 inches tall, and you can see here that mostly sitting up straight, there was some space between my head and the ceiling of the Prius. But once we built and had this bench installed, with my hair not on top of my head, I just fit sitting straight up. When the seats are in and folded down, these flaps bridge the gap. They definitely needed to come out. Just a little more vacuuming. I call this segment Rocco Plays Air Piano While Trying to Decide How High the Desk Should Be. One of the things we're discussing is how far back I want to be able to move my driver's seat once the build is installed. Let me take this opportunity to introduce Julep. She lives with Rocco and somebody else you'll meet later. Alright, back to business. Rocco's having to think, and I'm trying to make sure to document everything well. If only because I'm afraid of forgetting how to be able to put my car back together again eventually. Rocco's already thinking that whatever we build is going to need to be nice and flat all the way around. So if you see that fluorescent green-yellow thing back there, that's a laser level, and it's projecting lines so that he knows where to mark with the blue painter's tape. Blue painter's tape worked out great because it doesn't leave behind sticky residue that other tapes can, but I will tell you that sometimes it kind of started to peel off between work weekends, but overall it worked out really well. So here we're discussing the idea of making some sort of pull-out table that'll go out of the back of the car. I want to be able to cook, do food prep here, but I also want to be able to use it for a desk. I've been envisioning live streaming music in front of pretty backgrounds while I travel around. It worked out pretty well, but more on that later. The space that we're looking at normally has a storage tray that sits above the spare tire. It comes stock in the 2015 Toyota Prius. It's actually that black thing in the truck bed back behind Rocco's head here, but I don't have a good shot of it for you. You know that 61-key MIDI keyboard we were talking about earlier? I want to be able to safely store that back here and also have room for other things. Moving to the back of the car, I got a crash course in how to template with cardboard. All we're doing is cutting cardboard to fit around the components and taping it together so that we have a template to trace onto wood later. Our design for this evolved as we went, but this was the beginning of figuring out what we eventually ended up with. So this first day was just supposed to be a planning session, but we ended up taking out the front seat, the back bench seat. Rocco made a level line around the car. We did a lot of planning, and we started templating the back storage area. And you met Julep Bean. It really wasn't the plan to take the seats out today, but we did. And now she can't look out the window. and she's not high enough to see anything. And she's gonna have to be a very adaptable bear for the rest of this week until we figure out the next step. A week, you're hilarious. Oh, I'm sorry you can't see, girl. She's like, boo. It seems to be confused by the missing seat. So I guess I'll Google this later tonight. All this really seems to do is make a couple of lights flash constantly. You may be able to figure something out yourself, but if you want a pre-made solution, I found something online at bradshacks.com. It's an airbag simulator dongle, and you plug it into one of the plugs that's underneath where the front passenger seat was. It fools the car into thinking that the seat is still there. It's $20, but I still haven't ordered it after almost a year. My build covers this part of the car, so I'll have to do it before I reassemble the build again. As I haven't tried it, I can't guarantee you that this will work, but it looks like it will. And that was our first work day on the great Prius build of 2024. Keep trying to you know, you watch enough videos, you know.